It is like a disease of the mind. And it's where people start to live in thinking that if they just invest early, often, and always, it's where they start thinking if they cut back and save that they'll have more in the future. It's a budgetary mindset that reduction is different than production. So here's the thing to write down. No one shrinks their way to wealth. Service, solving problems, and delivering value is how business is built. Now, if we watch the news, then they have you think that business is just this really big conglomerate corporation that gets the government to do their bidding, and they do really bad things. But the reality is more small businesses employ people than big businesses do. And some of the greatest things and the greatest problems that we face, I feel like small business owners are the ones that are out there solving it. So really it's time to embrace and love business in a standpoint that it means that we can deliver value, impact other people's lives, and improve the world. And if everyone would just embrace the combination of their mental and relationship capital, I would call that our soul purpose, S-O-U-L. Soul purpose is your values, it's your abilities, it's your passions combined for the highest purpose or the highest vision of your life. And I'm here to tell you that vision is the rarest commodity in the world. The rarest commodity, true vision. Like we can look at mission statements and all this kind of stuff of most organizations, and you know how it reads? Blah, blah, blah. If they mention customer service in their mission statement, customer service is just like a part of business, not a mission statement. Like what a real vision would be is what JFK said in 1961 on the 3 channels. He was on all 3 back then that you had to click through, I heard. I've never seen this, but I heard about it once. So he said, we're going to land a man on the moon and return them safely home within this decade. And most people, other than Steph Curry, believe that actually happened. My 11-year-old watched a YouTube video, and he's now an expert and says it was Stanley Kubrick. But I think bottom line is, even if it didn't happen, they went through some great degrees to have us believe that it did. So anyway, that's a vision. Because it didn't live on a wall. It lived in people's hearts. It catalyzed them. It excited them. For me, I want to liberate 1 million entrepreneurs to become economically independent. Economic independence means enough recurring revenue and cash flow from assets to cover your basic lifestyle expenses. When you're in that place, you can swing for the fences in everything you do, and you have time to really calculate and consider what legacy means without money being the obstacle or reason that you don't do it, right? And what I'm really excited about is first-generation entrepreneurs, first-generation wealth, because most first-generation people don't understand what's going to happen when they transfer this wealth and how to transfer that wealth. I'm just not too excited about these uber-wealthy families that, like, you know, I don't know. I'm from a small coal mining town, so we worked with a billionaire once, and it was the worst experience I've ever had. Okay, second worst, next to that time I vomited, that is the worst experience ever. But we worked with NFL players. That was a pretty close second because they just get pitched a lot of really stupid ideas that we don't get paid enough to tell them not to do. But I want to work with people that are really out there making an impact and don't get the same advice as those highly affluent people that are affording a family office. Because part of the reason the Rockefellers are now on their 6th generation of wealth, 153 people living off the trust. By the way, not as trust fund babies. We've had bank presidents, we've had senators, and they donated $50 million to charity last year just off the interest that they're earning while this thing's growing. Part of the difference is they had a family office, maybe the creator of the family office. So I'm going to start drawing out what's called the family legacy ring. The first part of this family legacy ring is the family office. A family office, I learned about it when I was 22 years old. I went to New York. I was shadowing this guy named Vince. And see, Vince, I was just an annoying little brat at 22 to him, but his wife really liked me and his secretary really liked me, so I got to tag along and watch him do these appointments as a fly on the wall. I always find it interesting when people say, you're too young, or, hey, I'm too young to do this. When I was young, I had more access to anything I wanted because most successful people like to pay it forward, and they're willing to do things for young people. So when I was 22, I went in. The first thing we saw was a Wall Street executive that he was working with that was worth $20 million, and guess how much money was in the stock market of the $20 million? $500,000. That's it. $19.5 million, not where he made his money telling people what to do, and, versus what he did himself. So that was an eye-opener for me. The next place we went, he was presenting a $400 million strategy. The client wasn't even there. It was a conference room table filled with attorneys, accountants, investment advisors, all these types of risk management specialists, and they were doing something that I had heard about all the time in finance, but I had never seen up until that point. This is the Sasquatch of finance. You know, everyone's heard about Sasquatch, no one's ever seen it. This was due diligence. They were doing real due diligence. And so when the meeting was over, I was like, what was that? He goes, oh, it's a family office. I'm like, what's a family office? He goes, well, it's basically having a financial team that all works together for a family. This one takes on maybe 20 clients a year. He said it was lower tier. I'm like, what does lower tier mean? He goes, like if you're worth $30 million, they might take you on. I'm like, well, hell, if we go back to East Carbon, where I'm from, see, East Carbon, at its heyday, had 5,000 people that lived there and 2 cops. I just went back there last December to film some stuff for an origin story. First off, this is how I was greeted. 4 kids doing this as we came into town. Beautiful thing. Felt really heartwarming. I felt very welcome. I used to have a Bentley. I remember driving a Bentley there once. They just thought it was the nicest Chrysler 300 they had ever seen. Where did you get that grill? Well, yeah. So anyway, now, just so you know, East Carbon has 1,000 people and 5 cops instead of 5,000 people and 2 cops. That's a place where dreams go to die, right? And if we would have tried to gather up all the assets of that town, we wouldn't have even had enough money to actually afford this, family office. So, as many young entrepreneurs do, I made a very naive statement in that moment. I said, I'm gonna build a family office for people that are entrepreneurial, and we're not gonna care about net worth. It was just like a little 13-year venture to build, because imagine getting attorneys and accountants on the same page, and investment advisors, and real estate people, and cash flow specialists, and all this kind of stuff, and vetting that where they actually aren't just saying, oh yeah, we believe in what you say. Then I give them Killing Sacred Cows, and I listen to the first meeting they do. I'm like, you believe in the opposite of what I say, right? So it was a little bit of work, but a family office, when you have a comprehensive financial team working on your behalf, that was something that the Rockefellers had. And by the way, when I was writing the book and doing webinars, I got to talk to the Rockefeller Family Office CPA, and she became a client. Because I said, look, I'm happy to help you out if I can interview you, put it on the record, and put it in the book. And so this was a huge advantage for them because this was the right relationship capital. In business, we've heard it over and over. You got to have an A team. IBM did a study and said an A teamer produces 5,200% more than a B teamer. The same thing happens in your financial team. We've got to have an amazing financial team that communicates with one another, because if they don't, things are going to slip through the cracks, things are going to break down, and you're going to have a financial surprise that could derail you or even destroy your legacy. I believe we're all in store for financial surprises, but we can address 90+% of them with the right information and the right team that protects you through real due diligence, not just through transactions. Finance, when I began, I used to tell people I was a financial planner when I was 19 years old. What that really consisted of is I passed 2 tests. I passed a Series 6, well, I guess 3 tests, and 63, and a life insurance test. And when I told people I was working for a financial firm, what that really consisted of was bringing my friends and family into the general agent to peddle them mutual funds and life insurance. Okay, now the first 2 years went really well because it was 98 and 99. And my family, their entire money management methodology, this was what I inherited from a methodology standpoint, was they put cash in coffee cans. I don't know if any of you have family that have ever done this. They put it in the cellar. When my great aunt died, we actually had to get metal detectors and go through the backyard just in case she had buried some there. But she hadn't. She had bought more toilet paper than any human being. She thought it was going to be the most rare commodity in the world. She had a garage, no cars in it, just toilet paper. I was like, I don't know if she's really dirty or really clean. I'm not sure. I was very confused about it as a child. But I took and I put them into riskier things because I erroneously believed that high risk was going to equal higher return, and from 98 to 99 it did. So I was like, if you remember the show Doogie Howser, I was the Doogie Howser of finance for my family, a little financial Einstein, but I had nothing to do with that growth. I was handing the money over to people I had never met, the market was going up, and Warren Buffett has this awesome quote where he says, you find out who's swimming naked when the tide rolls back, and I was buck naked. I didn't know what I was doing, right? So family reunions got a lot more awkward. Like when you show up and you're making money, awesome. When you're not, they're like, yeah, let's go talk to Garrett. Little boy wonder, Doogie had my ass, right? Like that whole kind of concept. Not good for legacy, I'm here to tell you. But legacy, part of the reason it's so important to me is because my great-grandfather in 1913 lived in San Giovanni in Fiore in Italy, and he was being taxed so heavily by his government and by the mob, because that's pretty close to Sicily down there, that he actually had to leave his pregnant wife to get on a boat, which I went to San Giovanni. I went over more bridges because it's in like this forest area. I don't even know how you got to Naples to get to the boat, first off. That had to be a treacherous trek back in 1913. And how ironic, does anyone else know why 1913 is significant in the United States? The US Revenue Act came out in 1913. How awesome is that for a kick in the pants? So he leaves his family, doesn't speak English, gets to Ellis Island, living off something called mazzosola, which is a honey bread that doesn't spoil, but it's hard as your head after a little while, right? And then he gets there, they can't understand him, and so they change his last name from Iaquinta to Aquinto. Then he becomes a goat herder in East Carbon, Utah, because some Greeks and Italians had been there. Then he became a coal miner. How exciting is that? Lived in a tent for 7 years until he could afford to buy a home and bring his wife and his daughter that he hadn't met, that was now almost 7 years old. Like, what happens in that kind of a situation is that's a bold move. It's amazing what you did for our family, but it also created massive scarcity in the family. Life became about hard work, not about fun. And I'm here to tell you, like, hard work is a good ethic, but hard work with the wrong philosophy still equals bankruptcy. Hard work and not understanding money and finance still equals a life of struggle. And that's where they were. Because the mindset that's reductionist absolutely destroys wealth. Scarcity is the greatest destroyer of wealth. No luck or saving or discipline or rate of return or financial advisor will save someone if they're in scarcity, because that's a consumer condition where people look to take more from the world than they give to it. It is like a disease of the mind. And it's where people start to live in thinking that if they just invest early, often, and always, it's where they start thinking if they cut back and save, that they'll have more in the future. It's a budgetary mindset that reduction is different than production. So here's the thing to write down. No one shrinks their way to wealth. And my family had bought into that. They were going to save their way there. They were pinching pennies until they had blisters on their fingers. I'm pretty sure my great aunt had the first dollar she ever earned. She actually, true story, applied for welfare, got denied because they found $550,000 in her savings account. See, because financial freedom is not a state of having. Financial freedom is a state of being. Financial freedom is when money's no longer the reason or excuse why we would do or not do something. It's no longer the primary reason or excuse. Let me break that down a little bit further. There's 3 measures of worth. Right? The first measure is price. People are really price sensitive in this world, hence Black Friday. I went once, that's all it took. First off, I set my alarm for a time I didn't know existed, 3 a.m. That is vicious and violent. Then I went and I waited in line to buy a CD player, yes, it was a CD player back then, for $20 that worked for a week. Low price, high cost, because I'm pretty sure I got in a fight with my wife that day because I was very grouchy and I didn't understand why we were doing this Black Friday thing to so-called save money, because our time was probably worth more than what we were doing to save a few bucks here or there. And then my other aunt, by the way, told me a Black Friday story where she knocked someone over to steal the tree out of her basket. She's the one we read about on the news. See, scarcity, that's what happens when you buy into it. You do stupid stuff like that. So price is the first measure of worth. It's just what you pay. Investors have to see beyond price. If you only look at price, you get stuck in that scarcity, budgeting mindset, and budgeting sucks. It will actually harm you more than help you, and I'll give you a solution to it. The second measure of worth is cost, and this is more the economics behind something. Cost is what is the net impact. Like, you could actually find an accountant that cost you 3 times as much, but be as far as price, but be a lower cost because they save you so much money in tax. Some accountants are mere historians that file something. Other accountants are strategists that come up with ideas of how you can keep a lot more of what you make by legally and ethically stopping tipping the government. We find this year, I think it's close to 100% of business owners are going to tip the government because of 199A and everything that came with the Trump tax plan. But in the past, when we do surveys and when we talk to our clients, it was 93% of people that were overpaying the government, which, by the way, one of the easiest ways to get a great rate of return is save tax. Because if that frees up $20,000, $30,000 a year, how long would it have taken to save and scrimp and set money aside or buy a property and create that level of cash flow? In this room, you're going to get there a lot faster because you think like investors. In society that's just putting money in a mutual fund, it's going to take them 10, 20 years to compete with 20 minutes. Think efficiency first. As a matter of fact, let's just say it this way. There's 3 ways to live within your means, but most people stop with the first. The first way is to budget, to eliminate, to cut. Who's excited to scrimp their way to wealth? Yeah, that sucks, right? The second way is to be more efficient, which comes to 4 main I's. The first I is the IRS. Get your money back by not overpaying it. You can go back 3 years, by the way, and amend returns. So if you're dealing with software and modifying it, you need to learn about R&D because you can get major credits. If you have research that you're doing, even for the real estate you're buying, you can actually get domestic production credits, and you can claw back up to 3 years and put that money back in your pocket. I can go through hundreds of tax strategies. I just want to give you a few ideas there. The second I is interest. For people that have more than 2 loans, most of the time they're paying more interest, like 4 out of 5 times, than they need to be, because they need to have the 4 C's down. The first one is the right credit. 780 is an amazing score. 800's bragging, but my wife said 800. She reminds me that it's better than me. I just think it's because women are more responsible, and I think it's a bias against my hair is what I'm going to believe, you know? So 780, get the right credit. Second is the right collateral. Collateral could lower your interest rate, right? You refinance a car, it's going to be an installment loan, it's going to improve your credit score, it's going to be a lower interest rate than a credit card, or obviously if you have real estate, that's collateral. The third C would be the right cash flow reporting. We recently had one of our clients go to get a loan, get denied, and when we looked at their financial report, it's because they had given $200,000 to charity and classified it as an education expense. So it looked like it was an expense to the business versus a charitable donation. Once we reclassified it, they were able to go get the loan, right? So the right cash flow reporting. You got to look good to the bank and have the right type of reporting, and the more chaotic the reporting, the more risky you are as a lender. And the fourth C is the right connections, right? The right connections. Certain banks lend certain ways. Other banks lend on other things. I had someone just 2 weeks ago meeting with them in person at their vineyard in San Jose. And the bottom line is it took them so long to finance because they were talking to the wrong banks. And then all of a sudden they got one that worked with vineyards and they got it done in 13 days. Or maybe you need a portfolio bank because that's going to be different. Or a private bank because it's more about relationship banking. You've got to figure out the easiest access to money, but not only the easiest access, the best interest rates. I've seen private banks give people 1.25% because they have the right collateral, they have the right credit score, they have the right cash flow, they have the right reporting. So the second I was interest. You got to find ways to renegotiate, to recapture, or just find if you have underperforming assets that are earning less than what you're actually paying on your interest, and that's a guaranteed return that improves cash flow, improves debt to income, which gives you more purchasing power when it comes to your loans. The third I is investments. And when it comes to investments, this is where I feel it's the most misleading, because people love to talk in percentages. But percentages, if there's such thing as compound interest, there's a cousin to it called compound cost. If there's exponential growth, there's exponential cost, right, and loss. So let's say you had 100 grand, you invest it for 30 years. 30 years from now, if that earned 10% a year, which it's not going to do in the stock market, but let's say it did every single year, never had a down year, it grows to 1.74 million. What if you only earn 9.2% because of 12B1 fees, retirement plan fees, non-performing fees like admin fees and legal fees and those kind of things? So you just earn 0.8% less. At 9.2%, it grows to 1.4 million. That's a $340,000 drag on your money because of something that seems inconsequential. But if in finance we start thinking about dollars and cents in the bottom line versus percentages, it's a change in perspective that could be a change in your financial bank account.